Role queue finally launched and a new hero came out to shake up the game and the meta, but there still seems to be plenty of things that Blizzard could be doing and we sure hope are working on. And after tweeting out to all of you and getting hundreds of replies of things that we as a community want to see changed, improved, fixed, etc., today is a video discussing all of these things. Of course, you can let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and if you see comments you agree with down there, be sure to thumbs them up as well so we can kind of curate the list a little bit better. I want to get to balance, because I think that's the big conversation most of us want to have, but let's not forget some of the basic fundamentals that probably should be in the game already, and number one for me is stats. Better stat tracking, a leaderboard or scoreboard. Let's toss out that outdated medal system that just forces you to look inward towards your team and point fingers. A lot of them aren't even that useful. Everybody shares eliminations anyway. You only have 2 healers, so one of them's just gonna heal more. A binary answer to that doesn't tell you anything. Objective kills and objective time, nobody really cares about that. Doesn't really tell you anything. Let's overhaul all of that and instead base all of your statistics based on a average per 10, which by the way is how they track most of your stats behind the scenes. If you go into the player profile and check out any of your characters, most of your stats are done this way. Then why do we have the overly simplistic medal system? I want to see stats like healing received or damage done to eliminations. Luckily, we were able to change it to get hero damage done. It used to be overall damage done, which just meant spamming barriers, but hero damage done isn't necessarily much better because damage done to eliminations lets you know who had the impact damage towards things that actually died rather than who farmed tanks the most, which is typically who has the most hero damage. Regardless, just more and more stats. This might be confusing for a lot of players, but it won't be any more or less confusing than it is now, and with more information, we all can have a better idea of how we're playing. Next up, number 2, maps and game modes selection. Why isn't there a map vote or map vetoes or map bans or rotating maps in a season? There's way too much map content. And frankly, it's been 3 years, and my teammates at the highest levels of play still don't know how to escape chokes properly. There's way too much complexity with the number of maps you play, and Blizzard's response when the community has asked for map bans is that they would rather improve game modes before banning them out, which of course ignores the fact that nobody agrees on these things. I like 2CP. A lot of my best heroes are good at 2CP, and I like the style of play. I would prefer to play it with people who actually want to play it, because it increases the likelihood that they actually know how to play the mode. More progression towards what people actually want is never a bad thing, even if it means a big percentage of the map pool doesn't get picked. Oh well, the maps don't have feelings, the players do. So we should be emboldening players' choice. The fact that this isn't something that we speak about constantly when every other shooter game that I can think of has this, CSGO, Call of Duty, Halo, Quake Champions, you name it, they all have ways to curate the map so that the players in the game of the lobby can play things they actually want. What a novel idea. You will get a lot of the same maps spammed out over and over again, but if that's what people want to play, why stop them? Okay, enough ranting and raving. Those 2 points at the start, I think, are must change, okay? Before we even discuss other things that are far more debatable, those first 2 points, I would hope we were all in agreement on. Now, the next area we're going to go into discussing is, of course, the balance problems. We jumped right into 222, and it doesn't really feel like there was a big balance overhaul like we expected. We've covered recently that Josh Knows said they wouldn't do a balance revert. Pretty unlikely, although there will be balance changes to come. And I wonder, are we going to get a suite of balance changes this week added to the PTR? They already did the nerfs to the beams a couple weeks ago, and then I don't believe it ever went live. If it did, it's news to me. I'd also expect multiple other changes as well. My question would be, are they waiting until after the grand finals in 2 weeks for the Overwatch League so that there isn't 2 different patches being played at once? You kind of want the live version of the game to be the same as the grand final, so I wonder if they're holding back progress on the PTR until after that so it doesn't sort of pull the rug out from under the grand finals. Through the responses that I've been seeing on Twitter, hundreds of tweets and thousands of comments over the past few weeks, I've collected a lot of data on the community's opinions on these things, and realistically, there's 2 major routes that they could go. They could lean into power creep, which is basically what they've been doing, right? Oh, Goats is a problem? Well, let's just keep buffing Reaper until he hopefully can counter it. Oh wait, he doesn't? Oh well, etc., right? They just keep buffing things on the outside, trying to be competitive in tier. And now that we've put Rollock into the mix of things, a lot of these characters are standing out. What could be done is buff everything around it, making the game even wackier and more cooldown based, or we could start widespread nerfing things, which is something me and Samito talked about many months ago. And I think with enough playtime on the way Rolock operates on the new patch, many of you are in agreement with this as well. It seemed like an outrageous idea at the time, I'm sure, to say widespread nerfs, but it is the best thing for the health of the game if we're ever going to see skill start to outweigh cooldown usage ever. Despite them saying that they don't want to revert the changes for the GOATS meta, would they really affect the game in a negative way? Let's start to add these up, okay? Reaper, I think, is the king problem maker right now. They finally made Shadow Step good. They made Wraith Form insane on top of the incredible lifesteal he has. 40% means that he can duel most of the tanks in the game. Keep in mind, he also benefited from the major armor change, which was yet another way to attempt to get GOATs nerfed. But that had ripple effects onto characters like Winston and Reinhardt, who had that natural armor in their health and badly needed it to survive up against some of these spread weapon characters. With those things nerfed, well, the armor tanks aren't getting much play other than Orisa, who's got Fortify anyway on top of it, which is really the way she survives. And Winston and Reinhardt, although I would say are far more applicable than people make them out to be, they're very strong actually, until the enemy runs some of the best DPS, who also are some of the power creep DPS, being Reaper, Mei, Doomfist, and Hanzo, all kind of farm them. And not in a, well, you can outplay it, and if you're a really good tank, you can play better against it. No, against the Reaper, you just have to pick Sigma, which is incredibly broken and a huge reason why I think in the Overwatch League, we're just never going to see anything but Orisa and Sigma, because Reaper is just that strong. And up against Dive, because Mei can freeze multiple targets, in that anti-GOATS buff she got, well, the ripple effect is she's way too good against Dive. So because of that, no doubt in my mind, I think they can revert or nerf some of the GOATS buffs they gave to Mei, Reaper, potentially Hanzo and McCree if they stick out after that. And then I think you'll be surprised at how good the other tanks start to look yet again, because it's really these damage characters that just easily delete them that's forcing the tank meta to be the way it is, in my opinion. There's other things they could revert as well. Do we really need armor to be weaker again? Aren't we in a simpler game in 2.2.2, more similar to how it was at launch? I hope I'm not oversimplifying it, but can we just copy paste the old armor into the new patch and just see what it does? Do characters like Ryan, Winston, and Diva, who needed that armor health to be competitive, look better yet again? Only time will tell. Another major change we hear often is Lucio, who, if you remember, got his speed changed so that he himself was still very fast and could do all the plays he needs to do individually. Not to mention there also was the crowd control buff, making his knockbacks way better. But as far as the aura is concerned, the team aura went down a lot. Now, some people believe that if you buff that back up to help your teammates go faster, then we may be able to speed past double shield even better. However, I don't know if I'm on board with this one, because in actuality, oftentimes what doing that does, because both teams can pick Lucio, it just forces the enemy Lucio to play defensive and then respond with his own speed amp. I don't know if it objectively makes the game more aggressive or will help you be more aggressive up against shield comps, because if they run a Lucio themselves, Lucio in a Lucio mirror is always better played defensively. Now, of course, if they have something like Batiste Mercy or Ana, more diveable supports, then yes, having speed when the enemy doesn't is going to be a much bigger deal. It certainly would make Bunker easier to surround, without a doubt, especially characters like Bastion that don't move. Well, they can't reposition back with Lucio's speed anyway, so it makes that playstyle a bit worse. It makes your teammates a bit better up against things like sim turrets. So okay, never mind, you guys have convinced me. Yes, let's revert Lucio's speed, just give it back. The game played better when teams moved around quickly, and especially when Lucio's competing up against things like Immortality Field, which is incredibly strong. I don't see a reason not to revert these things. Now, there's a bunch of other cool interactions that you guys talked about with us on Twitter. For example, maybe Sigma's Kinetic Grasp should be hookable by Roadhog, or for a teamwork buff to Roadhog, maybe his Take a Breather gives sort of a damage reduction aura to his teammates. That would be pretty cool. Or realistically, any buff it gave to his teammates, I think would be neat. Many of you suggested that there'd be different attack types that were stronger against shields. There's a lot of good ideas floating around, but overall, as time has gone on, I don't think we should let Blizzard get away with acting like the balance of the game makes sense for Rolock. It doesn't. It feels like we're playing on the anti-GOATS patch, just with Rolock put in, and characters that got power corrupt in that process are sticking out like a sore thumb. A lot of people look to the double barrier popularity as the problem, but I think it's a byproduct of all the other power creep. I don't think the other tanks don't do their job. It's just that the double barrier tanks have the most ability to do nothing and survive. That's the crazy thing. If you watch the Overwatch playoffs or grand finals, I think you'll know kind of what I mean. Orisa Sigma sort of just stand around and spam, try to sneak in their cooldowns when they can, but realistically, they just are harder to kill than the other tanks, and meanwhile, your Doomfist tries to carry while your tanks just do everything they can to survive. I think this is a byproduct of all the tank nerfs that came through to attempt to make goats dead. Well, now, when you have to pick 2 tanks and 2 damage, the buffs that came through to DPS that weren't getting picked at the pro level, now that you have to pick them, look insane. That's the crazy thing. Like, they got buffed and buffed and buffed, but pros still wouldn't pick them. This is what we should have expected when you all of a sudden force everyone to play them. Okay, now that's everything on the balance side of things, and I'm sure you guys will have a healthy debate in the comment section down below. Let's move on to some other improvements that I think are kind of a no-brainer. Here's a list of things that we should be able to do while queuing for a match, keeping in mind that some queue times are really long if you want to queue for damage. Here's a few. Watching your own replays back, or going into the training range, or hey, even just playing quick play or arcade or something else while waiting in queue. Or, at worst, at least enable skirmish mode to be a free-for-all, rather than a team v team thing where both teams don't have full members and nobody's really trying. Just load up a game mode instead. I mean, I'd be happy as a clam if it was Hero Gauntlet, but free-for-all at least would be a way for players to pick the character they're going to be playing and warm up and actually shoot each other and have a little bit of fun while in skirmish. I've disabled skirmish in like week 1 of playing Overwatch and haven't used it ever since. I know some people still do, but anytime I try to use it, it feels like a waste of time. But if they actually improved it, I think a lot of people would be interested in using it and be less bored while waiting for their queue to pop. Speaking of queues though, there should be a ready up button like many other games have, so that players who are waiting for a longer queue and as they go to do some chores or a little bit of exercise or whatever, don't get put into the game when they're not actually ready. In other games, when you're waiting for a longer queue and it finally gets all the players required, everyone has to hit a button before you load up into the server, which is important because in Overwatch, without that, you'll get players that time out and get kicked because they're not ready at their keyboard or controller when the game finally loads up. And what I think is probably the biggest thing for them to add to the queue functionality is a priority queue, which is to say, you should be allowed to have the option to fill on one of your off roles so that you can get into a priority queue for your main role. So if you're just a damage player, but you're willing to fill in a game as support or tank, we can speed up this whole process. So the way this works is, you're in queue for damage, it's taken a while. A pop-up comes up and says, would you like to fill an in-demand role? You say yes, then you sort of get a token or an IOU when you go into your next queue, which will put you as a priority queue for your desired role, which, let's face it, it's damage, right? What this does is get people into games faster and rewards you to keep playing rather than wait. It's a huge problem that anybody can just wait for damage as long as they want, and the only incentive is a loot box or some XP or whatever they're doing to go tank and support. That's not good enough. Instead, let's incentivize based on the thing people actually want, which is a chance to play damage. This helps psychologically, but it also helps mathematically, because not only do tank and support need more fill players or reasons for people to fill those roles, the game needs a way for you to have a guaranteed lower queue time for damage as well. And I think we're all on board with this conceptually, because as long as somebody's off roll is accurately rated, it's always a nice gesture to the Overwatch community to fill. And that's something we've kind of lost with the introduction of role queue, which could be reintroduced with a priority queue incentive system. Next thing, replay system. Quick question. Why does it go back and forward in 20-second increments? Can we make that 10 or customize it maybe? 5 would be fine as well. 10 is a great number because that's how long it takes for a player to respawn. 5 is good because you could click it twice for 10, but maybe another 5 so that you can see the person coming back. 20 seconds is an unwieldy number. I also wish that there was a map overview button. Just click it and see the overhead map. Other things that would be cool for them to add, being able to change the team colors, because really nobody ever sees themselves as the red team, so it gets a little confusing when you're trying to watch it. And probably most important is being able to save and share replays, download them. And one last thing, being able to watch them as a group would be nice as well. And as we said earlier, watch them while in queue. Now here at the end of the video, we're going to put some big features that I think are pretty unlikely to come, but would do a lot for the game. Many of us have asked for guilds or clans for the longest time, but To me, I want those secondary to modes that are actually worth grouping up in, because right now, ranked is incredibly punishing to groups. It's better the lower you are in skill rating, but as you go up, it's more and more punishing to the point where you literally can't group above 2 in GM. So what I think is even more important than this is a tournament mode. You can call it a team queue or whatever, and the only way we see this working is it being a special timed event. Put a cute name on it or something like Tuesday Team Queue Night or something better than that. You can even incorporate this with the open division for that given region. There really isn't a good way to group up with friends and play Overwatch, which is a travesty. It has been for years. And in a dedicated mode for it, a team could be given its own rank. And you should be able to team up with whoever you want, but you and that small group get your own ranking, which will allow friends to actually play together. Other things that we would like, it's not just me who says it anymore. Many of you, I hear, also are on board with the idea of a hero bans mode, whether you call it captain mode like in Dota or a drafting mode. I ain't really hearing this Overwatch doesn't have enough heroes thing. You can't both say the game has power creep and not enough heroes. Like, those ideas don't go hand in hand, okay? Overwatch Classic would be a simple mode, and I could see that argument then, but now that we have 30 plus heroes and the cast gets bigger and more complicated day by day, the game's old enough to definitely support this idea. And in my opinion, this would be the best way to play the game. And I'm so passionate about this. If someone can make a really good workshop version of an exclusive pick, meaning no mirror matches, drafts mode, where you're able to draft a selection of heroes about 9 to 10 per team, I might be compelled to run a tournament just to see how that game mode plays out. I think it would be awesome and make the power creep meta slavery mirror match fest that we've had for the last 3 years look outdated, just like single pick did. But that's such a big idea. We can almost guarantee that this is never going to happen. I just always want to bring it up whenever I have the opportunity. But moving on to the last big thing that a lot of players want is an MMR reset. Now, I'm going to argue that this is a bad idea, but wanted to include it because at the very least, it's a move towards trying something. Even if it doesn't work, at least it's movement in a direction, right? But the reason why many players want this is either they're a high-ranked player and think players around them don't deserve to be as high as they are, or they're a low-ranked player and feel they're stuck in ELO hell and can't get out. The troublesome thing I have with both these arguments is that I think they're both wrong. If you're a high-ranked player, I think you need to realize that there just isn't enough good players to fill the upper brackets with. There just isn't. I know the scaling for Grandmasters used to be quite different back in the day, and there was far less people up there, but what's the alternative? DPS players at 4,500 already have 10 to 20 minute queue times. What, do you want it to be an hour? I just don't think there's enough players, and you're just never going to get the majority of Grandmasters games to feel like they do in your competitive scrims. Instead, I think you should be asking for a new game mode, a more competitive one than the basic rank mode, because most other games have that anyway. Whether it's Face It Pro League, ESEA, or the tournament mode I talked about, those would actually help, whereas what would happen with an MMR reset is that equally skilled players would still rise up to GM. That's still gonna happen. The only thing you introduce is a bunch of chaos in between, and similar goes for the lower ranks. Guys, it's gonna be everything for today's video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please be sure to leave the video a like and let us know in the comment section down below what you thought about anything we discussed here today. If you haven't already, please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes, and have conversations about the game of Overwatch like we did for the premise of today's video. So be sure to go leave us a follow on there and join in on the discussion. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.